Okay, welcome. I know we've got some more people joining us. Thank you for being here. I'm Terry Kimball, President and CEO of the Chandler Chamber, and we have got a jam-packed hour filled with great information for you business owners. So before we go ahead and get started, I really want to thank Jessica Post. She is the Director of Employment and Labor Law at Fennemore Craig Attorneys, and she is going to hear from us. But before I also read her bio, I also want to welcome back Paula Wittekind with the SBDC, because she is here with us every week talking about PPP and EIDL loans and how do you access that and how do you pivot to and how do you transition to that next stage. So thank you, Paula, for those continuing efforts. So please help me welcome Jessica Post. Jessica practices in the areas of labor and employment and complex business litigation. She assists companies in employment discrimination, wage and hour, restrictive covenant, and trade theft matters. For those clients, Jessica focuses on employment discrimination and wrongful termination litigation, representing clients before various state and federal courts and administrative agencies. She has defended employers in wage and hour class actions in both state and federal court, including cases involving missed meal and break periods and misclassification of employees. She has represented companies at trials, mediations, and arbitrations in proactive measures to ideally prevent such situations. Jessica works closely with human resources professionals to ensure clients comply with state and federal labor laws. And we as business owners know that these are continually changing all the time. Jessica has for complex commercial litigation practice, she also handles medical malpractice defense cases, as well as cases that involve both commercial and employment related issues. So please help me in welcoming Jessica Post. So Jessica, I wish you could hear the round of applause because it's there, trust me. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So thank you for joining us today.
No problem. And let me know if there's an issue with hearing me, but unless I hear from you, I'm going to assume everything is okay on my end.
Perfect. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. So for everybody, I've put together just a short PowerPoint kind of going through some key principles for dealing with a situation when an employee does test positive for COVID-19, which I know is a circumstance that lots and lots of employers are currently encountering here in Arizona. So here, what do we do? So basically, here's our basics, right? So an employee informs you they test positive. Now the hope is that they don't learn of the positive while they're at work, but I have had that happen also. If that's a circumstance, we immediately send the employee home. But in terms of what else do we do? So notification. The CDC still does recommend that employers notify coworkers if an employee tests positive for COVID-19. We need to do this in a confidential manner. And ultimately, our guiding principle is OSHA's rule that we provide a safe workplace. And so if we don't provide the notification and then an employee says, well, hey, I didn't know and I would have done this or that, ultimately, you're doing the notification to help comply with that provide a safe workplace. Now, I have worked with employers on the tone of those notifications. I think that they're really important. I don't think the notification that you want to do is, hey, we had an employee test positive, make sure you wash your hands, blah, 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 blah. I think this is a sensitive subject. I think that you use it as an opportunity to talk about the things that the company or the business is doing to protect its employees. I think employees want confidence right now that their employer is taking this seriously and doing everything to mitigate the likelihood that they get COVID-19. So I think it's important to have sort of an honest dialogue under these circumstances. So, all right, so you've got a notification that you're going to do. You're also going to determine who are close contacts, right? So hopefully the person who's got the positive diagnosis is still able to communicate with you and tell you who they've had close contact with. And the definition of close contact is anybody who's been within the positive COVID-19 employee for 10 minutes or more within 6 feet. And you're looking at who those people may be in the 24 hours before the person was symptomatic. So that's your that's your look back. So what you do is you find those close contacts. You talk with those close contacts, and if you're a non-essential business employee, then what you should do is that your close contacts, you should have them self-quarantine. They're high risk for you. They've been exposed to somebody with COVID-19. If you don't have them quarantine, then you are increasing your risk of having additional cases at work. I've certainly, for my clients that have been proactive on this, it's helped because what you also want to recommend is that these close contacts also go and have a COVID-19 test, right? Now, you don't want to do it the next day. So let's say the exposure happens one day and they go test the next day, right? Or 2 days later. That's not going to be enough time to make your test reliable, but you do want them to test at some point and see whether they are negative or positive, but that's going to help kind of control your workplace. In terms of if you're an essential business, so technically essential business employees, you don't have to do the 14-day quarantine. You do need to still talk to the close contact employees. You would still verify that they don't have any symptoms, and you would need to make sure that you have good monitoring in place. And good monitoring in place would be they take their temperature a couple times a day. They provide daily certifications that they don't have any symptoms. They are required to wear a face mask under. They're required to wear a face mask if they're a close contact essential business employee that you still have working for you. Now I'm going to give you the big but, because I have a lot of clients that are essential businesses, and if you go the route of saying, well, hey, we're an essential business, we're going to have the close contacts continue to work, you're increasing the risk at your workplace that you're going to have other COVID-19 instances. Because I've had for my clients where we've had one who's had a positive, we've sent close contacts out for testing and quarantining, and some of the close contacts have come back with positives. And so if you had those people in your workplace, then those are additional positives you have. So, I mean, my recommendation is that you still follow the quarantine regulations, even if you're an essential business, but that's up to you. You don't have to. I'm just giving that as sort of practical advice because, as you all know, I mean, we're all taking steps to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, but there's nothing that we can do to eliminate the spread of COVID-19. And so having somebody who's had close contact with somebody with COVID-19 in your workplace is increasing the likelihood that you will have another transmission at the workplace.
Jessica, this is Terry. Can I just have you hold up right here? I think we're having a few technical difficulties. Can you share your slides again with us?
Yeah.
It's just showing up as your name. I
Oh, is
apologize.
it? Okay. Let me, shoot, you know what I could have done is email them to you guys. All right, let me try sharing again.
Let's share again.
Okay.
If not, if you also, there we go. Yay. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
No, don't worry at all. I'm easy. No problem at all. Okay, so let me go to the next slide and make sure that you can see it.
Perfect.
Do you get it?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, so this is the slide for people who didn't see them, where I kind of go through the notification and your close contact analysis, and then your exposed non-essential business employees. And I've included links here for where the information is that I've gotten. And then here's the exposed essential business employee that I was talking about, the difference between essential businesses and non-essential businesses and sort of the risks you take if you don't quarantine close contacts. All right, so this is a question that I get a lot, which is, does my business need to close if an employee tests positive for COVID-19? And you go to Maricopa Governor, you go to their website, and the answer is you don't. I mean, you need to follow routine cleaning procedures. But the additional information that I would get here is that you also want to be prudent, right? So let me give you an example that I had where I've had a business where we did shut down for the day and we did clean and sterilize the whole location. It was an employee on the cleaning staff, actually, of the business, and that individual tested positive. And so she'd been all over the office, the business, the location. And so in that circumstance, we couldn't effectively just clean the high risk, the high touch places like the doorknobs and things. We needed to actually close, and we had a cleaning company come in and do a serious cleaning. So, and in that sense, in that case, we did send the employees home for the day. We paid. We were able to get the cleaning company in. They're they're very helpful right now. I mean, the cleaning company came in at 2, they were done by 11 p.m. and we opened our doors the next day. But so the answer is no, but you also need to be reasonable in terms of making your decisions. Are you still able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I lost you for a moment, so I just got nervous. Okay. All right, so going to the next slide. Oops. So here's another question I got. Can I require all of my employees to get tested? And the answer is generally you can. So under the EEOC guidelines right now, the EEOC has said that, you know, COVID-19 is high risk. And so as a result, we are allowed to require testing. What you would want to do is you'd want to be consistent. So for a different client that I've had where they had several cases at a location, and we'd had a situation where we had a couple cases and then we had another couple cases a few days later, and we just decided, all right, you know what, we need to shut down. We did the cleaning, we sent everybody out for testing, and we only had people who had a negative COVID-19 test come back. And so that's how we handled that circumstance. We can do that. You need to make sure that you're consistent in how you do it so you don't have a situation where there's some people that you're testing and others that you're not. But we are allowed to do lots of testing, and I would encourage you as employers to do a lot of testing right now. Okay, so here's another one that comes up, right? And I've certainly had this where other employees are now uncomfortable with somebody who's coming back to work after testing positive. So here is your, here's your standard. So, and this is from the CDC and also Maricopa County. But so for an employee who's tested positive and had symptoms, an employer can follow either of 2 routes for returning employees to work. The first is a symptom-based strategy, and that means that the employee has not had a fever for 3 days without the use of fever-reducing medication. The employee's symptoms have improved, and it's been 10 days since at least 10 days since the onset of symptoms. All right, so that's your symptom-based strategy. The test-based strategy is the employee's not had a fever without the use of fever-reducing medication. The employee's symptoms have improved, and the employee has 2 negative COVID-19 tests 24 hours apart. Now, Maricopa County doesn't include this right now, and I'll tell you, practically speaking, we don't have the testing capabilities in Arizona to take the test-based strategy approach. Maybe, you know, in a month, as things improve for us on the testing front, that's a better alternative. But I think right now we're basically on the symptom-based strategy because of testing shortages here in Arizona. Now, let's also talk about employees who don't have symptoms, because we are certainly having that too. And I know that when I've had a positive and we've sent close contacts out for testing, we've actually had some close contacts test positive. However, they never developed symptoms. So they were ultimately an asymptomatic positive. So the standard under the CDC for an asymptomatic positive is that you wait 10 days. So if they have a positive test on a particular day, we wait 10 days, and then if the employee does not develop symptoms, then the employee can come back. If the employee does develop symptoms, then you're up above and we're in our symptoms-based strategy, okay? Now, again, you can do a test-based strategy also, but like I mentioned, we don't currently have the testing capability to do that here in Arizona. I just included this real fast. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it for you, but you know, OSHA reporting, technically COVID-19 is a qualified illness that you would have to report. However, I think it's difficult right now. I think a business, given there's so much community spread, how does somebody know they got it at work versus out in the community? So just keep in mind OSHA, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. All right, so one of the things I did include emergency paid sick leave, and the reason why I wanted to talk for a moment about this, and this is what I'm encouraging, you know, some of my clients to do too, is this is a tool that businesses can use to help get the people out of their workplace who should be quarantined, right? So if somebody had close contact with somebody who is COVID-19, then they should be able to get a healthcare provider's note that says, hey, they need to be out for the 14 days. When they do that, then they're entitled to be paid for up to 80 hours. And so who does it apply to? It's all employees, and the only exception is for healthcare providers or emergency responders, and they may elect to exclude employees, but I'm still not sure why they would necessarily want to. But under emergency paid sick leave, that is a tool right now to help have your close contacts out of the workplace. And it's also a tool for somebody who's got symptoms, right? Somebody who's got a fever, somebody who's got chill, somebody who's got a cough. I mean, there's definitely circumstances still where employees have those symptoms and they don't have COVID-19, but we don't want those employees at work either right now, because we don't know if they have COVID-19 or not. And the emergency paid sick leave allows us to get them out of the workplace, get tested, be paid, right? One of the big reasons why employees don't report illnesses is because they want to be paid for the day, right? They don't want to not get paid. Well, this allows them to be paid. And this is a very good tool for employers because it's a tax credit for employers. So you get to write off the expense of the wages from the taxes that you owe. It's a credit. So you're not penalized for doing it. You're not paying for it. And so just for a refresher, I'm sure all of you have had a lot of training on emergency paid sick leave at this point, but ultimately, I mean, I've got this slide, but the reasons that are the ones that come up a lot for employers are the employee's been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine related to COVID-19. Well, again, that can be your close contact, right? The employee's experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis. Again, that helps us get employees out, because what you really, really, really want is you want employees who have symptoms of COVID-19. We want them not to come into the workplace. And then same thing for customers, right? If you're in a business with customers coming in, we don't want customers experiencing COVID-19 symptoms coming into our workplace. All right. One thing I will tell you that I've heard some people say is, after they use their emergency paid sick leave, then they go over into emergency FMLA, and that's actually incorrect. The emergency FMLA is totally separate. This is the emergency paid sick leave is the 80 hours here that you can help use to keep employees out of work who have had close contact or have symptoms. I think I mentioned this before, they get 80 hours. Part-time employees also are eligible to receive this. And again, it's from day one. And I've had a client, I had a client who had an employee start on day one and they got their positive test back on day 3. And they were eligible because that's the way that the statute's written. But on the other hand, we want that person to not be in the workplace. So it works out for us. This is just a slide. When I send my slides out, you'll get, this is just a reminder of how much is available for emergency paid sick leave. I mean, there's caps on it, can't exceed 511 per day for the 2 reasons that are most likely the ones that you would be using right now as you're having COVID-19 cases in the workplace. So that was sort of my kind of fast go through. The one other thing I would probably tell all of you, Governor Ducey last week issued, I would say, some stronger positions. I mean, he says that they're now going to be enforcing some of the guidelines, and one of them is putting together, a written COVID-19 mitigation plan. And I do think that that's important for businesses to do. I think, frankly, going through the exercise of doing it helps you think about where you could have vulnerabilities in terms of where employees might be touching the same thing or things along those lines. And then the other is Maricopa County has passed the face mask ordinance. And so that should, help at least with customers coming in, because one of the things I find that's really difficult, and, I go into Safeway and I have all these respect for the people at Safeway, and I see customers who don't have, face masks, and all the people at Safeway have face masks. And I think that having the customers wear face masks will help protect your employees, which is a good thing. So with that, that's kind of the information that I've got for you. I was kind of told to do 15 minutes, but I know that you've got questions. So I'm going to let Terry start throwing some questions my way. The one other caveat I want to give you is, I'm not your lawyer, which all of you guys know. And I'm giving more like hypothetical situations, but not actually legal advice.
Great. That's great information. Boy, Jessica, we've got a lot of questions here. So let me just start with this. And yes, I just want to make sure everybody will get a copy of this PowerPoint if you've registered on this. And then for further questions, obviously call Jessica, follow up with her. It's a great resource with Fennemore Craig. Okay, let's go to the first question. Does the company have to pay for the testing?
So the way that the testing should work is It's covered on insurance. Like insurance companies are generally under the Families First Coronavirus Act required to provide testing without shared responsibility for the individual. So they should be able to get free testing through their insurance policies.
What if your employee does not have insurance?
I would recommend that the employer pay for the test under that circumstance if you're requiring it. And then I believe that there's avenues also for the companies to be able to get tax deduction / credits for money used to help with testing.
Okay. If you close and have all your employees tested, do you have to wait to reopen until the test results come back?
Okay, so your question was, you decide to close, you've had a couple employees who are test positive, you decide to close, and then you wait for test results before you open back up?
Yes.
What I would do under that circumstance is, if you're making a decision, hey, we're gonna close and we're gonna require everybody to test, I would wait to get your negatives in for employees before you have them come back, or else you run the risk of, you've closed, you don't wait for the results, you open up and you're in the same situation. There's some providers, I know NextCare is the one that I've directed employers to use. I think Dignity is trying to do better with its turnaround time on tests also. Research needs to be done to make sure that employees are going to the right testing facility so that they get results back in a reasonable amount of time. But NextCare does have rapid testing available sometimes. I mean, they used to have it more, but because of this surge that we've had, they have it less. But yes, I think if you're closing your doors, you're requiring everybody to test, I don't think it makes sense to have employees come back without a negative, unless you find yourself, the alternative is you find yourself in a situation where 14 days have passed and we don't have a test result, then clearly you're already, and the person doesn't have symptoms, you're fine. But
Okay.
We don't want to have 14-day test lag periods. I mean, that's extremely difficult for businesses to be able to manage.
Yeah. We have had some employees with symptoms go and get tested, but test results could take 5 to 7 days now. During that wait period, we can have more cases. How do we handle this situation?
Well, so what you're gonna do, right? So you've got an employee who tests positive, right? Or you have an employee who has symptoms there, right? So they didn't have a positive test. They go out and they're waiting for their test. Right, they go out and get tested, they're waiting for the results, and then you have other employees who are developing symptoms. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so we want to get those employees, any employees with symptoms, we want out. I don't think you generally do your close contact analysis unless, I have done it a couple times where we haven't had a positive result, and the times when we did it, the person went to like urgent care, for example, and the person was actually sent to the hospital, and the urgent care person said, I'm 99% sure this person has COVID-19. That employee contacted the employer, told the employer, we did our close contact analysis, we got people out before we had a positive test. But I generally think you wait until you have your positive before you do your close contact analysis, but you keep anybody with symptoms out of the workplace, and you use that emergency paid sick leave to give them paid time out with symptoms.
And I do know, for instance, we've had some of our employers that have reported back to us where they're having their employees keep an Excel spreadsheet. Anybody who they have come in contact with that they are having conversations longer than 5 minutes with, and they can't practice social distancing, they're having them log it. So,
wow.
That's yeah.
Okay. That's dedication. That takes a lot of time, but they're being serious about that.
They are.
Yep.
What should we do? Oh, here's one. Where is the best place to go and get employees tested? I think you kind of talked about that. How long does it take? And which test should I have my employees take?
So you don't want to do the antibodies test, because the antibodies test is not accepted under the EOC as a reliable, like that's considered a medical exam for us. So we're not allowed to have antibody testing.
Okay.
Yep, but you are allowed to just have your regular old, I think it's serology. There's like a phrase, but regular current test that you go to at Banner, you go to any established place for a current, coronavirus COVID-19 test, and you should be fine.
Okay. What should we do if our employees say they have been exposed, but they don't have any symptoms? Do we take them off the schedule for 2 weeks?
So if an employee comes to you, and this is where it gets hard, right? So so when I think about risk, I think of like, who's the riskiest person to come in and work for you? So the riskiest person to come in and work for you is somebody whose family member has COVID-19, all right? And they're living with that person and they're coming into work. You are very vulnerable under that circumstance for the employee to have COVID-19 and pass it around at work. That's why in Governor Ducey's revised business guidelines, we want those people to stay home. It gets harder, I think, when I've had this come up where someone's like, well, I was at a party and someone else was at the party and then they were exposed to somebody who tested positive. That's too far removed, I would say. But I mean, ultimately, part of it is the company needs to be consistent on the position that it takes. It's hard to keep somebody out of the workplace if you can't also kind of get them qualified under emergency paid sick leave if they wouldn't qualify because they haven't been deemed to have had close contact. I would use that as kind of your standard a little bit for determining who to keep out of the workplace and for how long.
Okay. Is the Maricopa ordinance enforceable?
I mean, the idea, so basically the idea is that it is enforceable, although you can see that there was language in the executive order that was like, hey, we should use this for education before we actually start doing something. I think who's going to get hit is businesses more than, sort of like the individual, to be honest. But supposedly it's enforceable. I've not heard of any enforcement yet, although I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see some, because I'm sure that Governor Ducey is interested in driving our numbers down. And if, it will help businesses who are afraid will maybe be stronger. Some businesses that haven't been good about following the CDC guidelines, I think potential enforcement might scare them to then do that.
Okay. We're in retail and we have teenagers that are wanting time off and are finding this is the easiest way to get off by telling us they're exposed and have been pulling them off the schedule unpaid for 2 weeks. It really is a problem. Can we require a doctor's note if they don't have any symptoms?
I mean, it's their job. So they want to be, so that was an unpaid question essentially. So they're happy to just be out unpaid for 2 weeks.
I believe so. That's the way I'm reading it.
Can you require a doctor's note for that? It's hard because if they're happy to be unpaid, you're in a more difficult situation, right? I mean, we can't force people to come into work. Usually people want to be paid, and so you don't have that. You do have available work for them. And so, I mean, technically they shouldn't qualify for unemployment under those circumstances, because we also have that situation going on where unemployment's high and people are out, the recovery amount. Can you require a doctor's note? They're not using Arizona paid sick leave. You probably can require a doctor's note. I mean, I'm equivocating a little bit just because under Arizona paid sick leave statute, you're not allowed to, but they're not using Arizona paid sick leave. I mean, essentially they're saying, I want to be out because I've been in close contact, but they don't have a doctor's note. You know what? I think you can ask for something.
Okay. Hearsay. What do you do when an employee tells you that another employee has tested positive but has not disclosed this?
Okay. So, I mean, we definitely don't want a positive person in our workplace, right? So like, we want to encourage anybody to go to either a supervisor, a manager, HR, depending on the size of the company. And if they hear that an employee's tested positive, they should come and they should mention what they heard, and then HR supervisor needs to follow up with that employee. And I mean, I'll tell you too, like, and this was in, Governor Ducey's revised guidelines. So like my company, for example, we have to do daily certifications before we come in, right? Daily certifications require you to say, I don't have COVID-19. I don't have any COVID-19 symptoms. None of my family members that I live with have COVID-19 or COVID-19 symptoms. if I had an employee coming to work who was diagnosed as COVID-19 positive, I would want to get that employee out of my workplace and not have them ever return. But I think the way that you do that is you do that through certifications, because that person is being so reckless, if that is true, for the people that they're working with, that you want to have a mechanism as a company to not, to have an enforcement tool. And I think those daily certifications help you on that. I also think you train people, you tell them you can't come in, you have that in your written guidelines. I mean, we can't have people with a COVID-19 positive test in the workplace.
All right. What are the recommendations if an employee's spouse or roommate tests positive?
Yeah, so to me, that's your scary situation, right? Like that person now who lives with somebody who's positive, COVID-19 positive, I would use emergency paid sick leave, have that person get a healthcare note, a healthcare provider note saying that they're recommended to quarantine for 14 days, and I would keep that person out and they can return at 14 days if they don't have symptoms.
Okay. You mentioned not having an employee who has been exposed to another positive employee test right away, since it will likely be negative. How long should we wait for testing of the potentially exposed employee we sent home?
Yeah, it's funny. I read an article yesterday trying to get a sense at like what point tests become their most reliable. I mean, they're not reliable within 24 hours. If you're more at about 4 or 5 days out, your reliability is going up. If you're a non-essential workforce, the recommendation is 14 days. If you're an essential business, I've got other employers who are essential businesses and can't have some people out for 14 days. They're testing at 5 days. And then if the person doesn't have symptoms, they're returning them at 7 days to give a longer period of symptoms. But for non-essential businesses with close contact, I would use the full 14 days.
Okay. During this webinar, I just got a text from a manager that an employee's boyfriend's coworker got tested positive, and she just saw him last night and is asking if they should pull her off the schedule.
So the boyfriend that she was with last night just tested positive?
Yeah.
I would pull that person off the schedule.
Okay. Where can we get a close contact analysis?
I got it from the CDC website that talks about close contact, where it's essentially the 10 minutes. Originally, close contact wasn't defined, and then they helped us out a little bit, and they said where somebody is within 6 feet of somebody who's COVID-19 positive for 10 minutes. But you could go to the CDC and see if there's more details than that.
Okay. If an employee tells you their family members has symptoms and is waiting for test results, how long do we wait before the employee can return to work?
So like in that situation, how I would handle that one is that the employee who, so the employee's got symptoms, or not, the employee's family member has symptoms, right? So the employee's family member is going to go get tested, I'm assuming, right? We want the employee's family member has to get tested. We also need the person who's the family member. So usually actually when a family member takes a family member to get tested, they actually test both people because they're assuming that family, and so they're testing. But at the point that essentially, I think at the point that the family member with symptoms has a negative test, then the employee who lives with a negative test can come back.
Okay. Correct. The swab test is for active disease. We have found after extensive testing in our facility that the antibody testing does not turn up positive until 3 to 6 weeks later, if at all. And this does not help with active quarantine decisions. So thank you.
I've got a supporter.
There you go. What if an employee was tested but didn't share with us that they were tested until a positive result came back? What if an employee has tested but didn't share with us that they were tested until a positive result came back?
So for me, okay, you're going to want to have a good written policy on that, right? And it's going to depend a little bit on the circumstances. So if that employee is living with got tested because a family member got tested, you might have a situation where that's okay, right? So let's say the family member got tested because the family member was in close contact with somebody else but doesn't have symptoms, and then your employee got tested as a result also of that dynamic. Technically, you don't have symptoms there. You have testing, even though there's no symptoms. But if the person had symptoms or lived with somebody who had symptoms, then you'd have a violation of your policy. Now, you could have a policy that says you need to tell us anytime you have a COVID-19 test so we can assess whether it makes sense for you to come into the workplace. And if you had that in your policy, then you could have a violation of your policy. But ultimately, it's going to depend a little bit what you do there on what your specific facts are for why the person had the COVID-19 test and what your policy is.
All right. Exposure team members, do they have to stay out the 14 days if they have a negative test that comes back after only a few days after the exposure?
I mean, so all I can do is give you what the recommendation is, right? So the recommendation under the CDC is close contact for non-essential businesses is 14 days of quarantine. You know, can you make a decision to bring somebody back sooner after a negative test? You can. You can. I mean, you're not following the CDC guidelines there under that circumstance. So you're taking some risk that the negative test maybe occurred sooner than the symptoms would have emerged.
Okay. To get paid sick leave, can we require a doctor's note?
So this comes up, and ultimately, and I should mention this too, and the IRS has a good website on what documentation you need. Ultimately, you need documentation to support your reasons for emergency paid sick leave in order to get the tax credit. So, you know, should you have a healthcare provider's note who says, hey, I'm recommending that this person quarantine for 14 days? Yes, that is good for you to A, give the person the emergency paid sick leave, and then B, get the tax credit for it. We always have to be a little bit careful because Arizona paid sick leave, you can't ask for a doctor's note until you're at 3 days. But here they're using emergency paid sick leave, not Arizona paid sick leave. So I would get documentation supporting my emergency paid sick leave.
Okay. A couple more questions. How do you do your daily certifications?
So your best daily certification is outside of the workplace, right? Because then you don't have the situation where somebody comes into the workplace and is like, oh, I forgot, you know, my sister is positive and I live with her, which I've had happen. So your best certifications are before someone comes in, because then you don't have somebody who's come into the workplace with, you know, with a reason that they shouldn't have come in. Alternatively, they can come in and when they log in, they can do it. Sometimes you can set up ADP, right? When they punch in, certification pops up before and they certify. We do it at our firm. I have to log into a specific place. I click on it, you know, I've got my little buttons I press and then I certify. You can do it with paper before people come in if you want. You want to use different pens. We don't want to contaminate with pens. I mean, there's a bunch of different options on how to do that.
Okay. What do you do when your employees cannot get the COVID-19 test, but their roommates have tested positive?
Well, I don't believe they can't get the COVID-19 test, but we don't want somebody coming in if they're living with someone who's positive. I think they could have a delay in getting a test. But, you know, truthfully, I'm okay with a delay for a few days because we don't want that person in the workplace, and the delay is only going to increase the likelihood of your test having a reliable result. So I would tell the employee, you got to get signed up to test, because they can get signed up. Even if there's a delay, they get signed up in 3 or 4 days and they can get tested.
Okay, last question. CDC guidelines say fever of 100.4. We had an employee who came in and we did temperature checks upon arrival and her temperature was at 99. Should she be sent home?
So the thing is if she's saying that she has no other symptoms, technically that's not a fever under the CDC guidelines. But I think you'd ask her, you know, I think it's fair to ask under that circumstance if she has any other symptoms, so like aches or anything else that's consistent, because she might be one of those people that just runs a 99-degree fever. I don't, like if I've got a 99-degree fever, like I don't feel well, but there's other people who may have a 99 and that's their norm.
Well, and you also don't know if they've just come in from a hot car, that she may not have air conditioning on, and
That's right. That's
a
right.
number of things too as well. So
That's right. And the CDC guidelines on temperature testing too, I mean, they recommend that even if you had somebody who tested at 100.4, if they don't have other symptoms, we actually give them a period of time, like, to go cool down, you know, for perhaps they were in a hot car or something, and then we do the test again and see what the temperature is.
wow. Jessica, there are so many questions, and I know that you deal with this every day, but this is all new territory for businesses and for all of us. And so your information is invaluable, and I appreciate you taking that time. So, and we will get this, everybody who registered for this seminar, we will go ahead and get this PowerPoint out to you. So Jessica, you're welcome to stay on, and thank you for joining us. But we're going to flip over to Paula with SBDC just to give us a quick update. And Paula, thank you for joining us again. Paula, what is going on? Because we have just a few more days for PPP funding by the end of this month. And then EIDL loans, what's happening with that? Because that's opened back up. Paul, I think you may still be on mute.
Sorry, I was doing that earlier this morning. Hi, everyone. Okay, so it's much more informative with the volume on. So let's go ahead and start with the EIDL loan question first. So if you would switch to the next slide, there we go. So yes, the EIDL loan portal is once again open to all businesses, and you can access that from the SBA.gov website. And let's go to the next slide. I've listed just a couple of details. So if you go to the SBA.gov site, you're going to get to the application. This is an online application, pretty simple and straightforward. I've heard there are a few changes to that application, but nothing major. Let's go to the next slide and just review some of the details. Now, when you fill out this emergency injury disaster loan application, the first thing it allows for is it makes you eligible for that up to $10,000 grant. And that is based on basically employee headcount, $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So if you're a business of one, you would be eligible for $1,000. If you have more than 10 employees, you would just be eligible for up to the $10,000. Now, as you fill that application out, it also is the application for the EIDL loan. So you may get a grant, but then you may also still be eligible for a loan. And those are the loans that are at the 3.75%. It looks like they're still capping those up to $150,000 and with no prepayment penalties, 30-year term. So a good offer there if you're able to, if you're eligible for those loans. Now, we are hearing from our clients and from the SBA that they're still working through some of those original applications. And so if you've not yet heard back about your grant or heard about a loan, it's not to say that they're not done. They're still processing things through. If you do get the grant, it's going to drop right into the bank account that you gave them information in the application. So just keep an eye on your bank account. It'll show up with no email, no notification. If you're eligible for the loan, you will receive an email inviting you to set up an account through the portal. And then that takes you through that next process where you may have to submit some additional documentation to be eligible for that up to $150,000. So I would encourage you to do that. We don't have a date as to when that portal will close at this point, likely right until the funds are exhausted, but we just don't know what the date possibly would be. So if you have not yet applied, I would encourage you to apply for that. And just know that if you do get one of those advanced grants and you've also received a paycheck protection loan, those grant monies are to be subtracted from the forgiveness amount of the PPP loan. All right, next slide, please. So the paycheck protection loan, now this, the PPP loan closes June 30th, but you know, the deadline's fast approaching. the key here is that in order to be eligible, you must have an SBA loan number that's been issued. So that really means, realistically, if you are interested in a PPP loan, you need to take action today, no later than tomorrow, to apply for these loans, because you need to get through the lender's process. This is through a lender, but then that lender will need to also get an SBA loan number, and that has to happen by June 30th. And Terry, I have as we're working with clients, we have identified some of the lenders we've been talking to that are still offering the PPP loans. So I put a short list of options there in the chat for the folks on the call here today. So I would encourage you to check into that today, no later than tomorrow, if you still are looking for a PPP loan.
And I do know that, and Paula, we have a couple more that we have been dealing with, some of our chamber members that we can add to that list. So if you're interested, to be honest with you, please call us so that we can help handhold you through this, because time is of the essence this week.
Absolutely, absolutely. Next slide. Now here again, like I said, this is through a lender, so you need to contact the lender. Once you get the PPP loan, right, there's going to, and you expend those monies, there will be a forgiveness process. So we have many clients now that have used their PPP monies and they're ready to start the forgiveness process. Well, I can tell you now that the lenders are still kind of ramping their processes up in order to accept the forgiveness applications. But I would just recommend contact your lender, stay in touch with the lender when you're ready for the forgiveness process. Let them know you are ready. There is an application that is posted. I'm going to show you where to go get that application. But there's a forgiveness application you'll need to fill out and documentation that will need to go along with the application that you submit to your lender. Next slide, please. So those documents you can find on the U.S. Department of Treasury site. It's that first link. There is a new easy application form. So I would encourage you to just download that application form, take a look through it. I think it's on page 4 of that document. It's a nice comprehensive list of the supporting documentation that you would be required to submit with a forgiveness application. And then it also lists a comprehensive list of documentation that you'll need to retain for 6 years and keep on file. So go ahead, just to get ready for the forgiveness process, take a look at those documents and begin to gather up the information that you're going to need. And oftentimes, let me say too, that we're getting questions about how soon do I need to apply for forgiveness? And it's not immediate. So you have up to that, through that November timeframe to apply for the forgiveness process. So you can kind of take a breath. Lenders are coming up to speed, and you have plenty of time to start and get through that forgiveness process. Next slide. These are just a couple of highlights for that Flexibility Act, those changes that occurred a couple of weeks back. Really just on the first bullet point talking about where originally it was the covered period was 8 weeks. Now you have up to 24 weeks to use those monies. And as you're going through the forgiveness process, you can basically select if you want to use the 8-week or the 24-week period. The payroll forgiveness level is now at 60% for payroll expenditures rather than the original 75%, so giving you more leeway on the use of those funds and the ability to actually hit that forgiveness level, so nothing is converted to the loan. And then that loan maturity period originally was 2 years. So, if you had that loan before June 5th, it's that 2-year maturity period for any monies that were converted to a loan. But you can certainly work with your lender, because now there's a little bit more leeway where you can extend that loan term out to 5 years if you have some of the monies that were converted to the loan because you did not hit that forgiveness level. Next slide. And really just to wrap up, I am a business analyst with the Maricopa SBDC. We provide no-fee counseling to small businesses here in Maricopa County. What you see on the screen are all the things plus more that we help our clients with. But really at this particular point in time, we're now starting to work with our clients at looking at, you know, my money is running out. I've gotten these loans. What are the next steps? Where do I go next? And then the second conversation that we're starting to have with clients is now really looking at the business where you are today and now how to be a more resilient business. So you're prepared for the things to come in the future. So I'll be sharing additional information, hopefully in future sessions, Terry, about those two main areas. But we do have expertise in all areas of business development expertise. So I hope you check us out. And it is no fee counseling. So we're zero budget line, and there's no trick to that. We're funded by the SBA and Maricopa Community Colleges. So, and then finally, just to request our services, go to maricopa-sbdc.com and click on the request counseling, fill out a very simple form. That puts you into our pipeline. You're contacted by Connie or Yvette, who will assign you to a lead counselor. And then your lead counselor will contact you to sit down and schedule an initial counseling session. And we are meeting virtually at this point in time. And we would be happy to meet with you. And I just encourage you to come check out our services and see if it's a good fit for your needs. Like I said, it's no fee counseling, and we're helping clients in all different industries at all different stages. So we'd love to see you and help you.
Paula, thank you. You know I'm a huge fan because you have done some amazing things. In fact, you've actually had some of our Chandler businesses win statewide and national awards. So because of your expertise and guidance. We have a couple of questions here. I was informed by my accountant that the EIDL grant can be used on top of the PPP loan as long as the funds are expensed outside of PPP expenses and only used for ongoing operating business cost. Is this, it says, is this incorrect? I think they meant correct.
So I'm not sure I'm just reading it here, Terry. The EIDL grant can be used on top of the PPP loan. So you can use the EIDL grant monies for those business expenses. You don't have to pay it back. There's nothing you have to report back on. But if you do receive the grant money, the way it's stated in the guidance documents is that grant is subtracted from any PPP forgiveness loan amount. So I'm not sure if that answers. I'm reading down through the rest of it here.
Yeah.
So you're using it for business operating costs. Yes, yeah, that's what you can use the grant for, of course.
Well, and the other thing is, and I will tell you, I helped somebody with the EIDL grant yesterday, actually helping them get online. And it took us less than 30 minutes to fill out everything. And it was partly because we were having some computer glitches. And at the end, they were able to print out their number. And now they'll just wait to see, and they're watching that bank account to see if that's deposited into that. So,
yes, and it can take some time to move through that process to get the funds. So. Yeah.
It was just, and I just want to reiterate. So that one, it was very easy to follow. And also it won't let you go on to the next step unless you have completed everything too. So I think there were 3 different screens, if I remember correctly, but we were able to help get this business get that put in and kind of walk through it. We didn't do it. They did all the work, but it was real easy. So want to do that. Again, there's 2 different loan programs. The EIDL grant program goes right on the SBA website. And where a PPP, you have to go through a bank. So,
right.
All right. All right. Well, Paula, you again continue. Thank you so much for staying on top of this because it is forever changing. We will not have, those of you that are on the line, we will not have a our regular Thursday meeting next week or the following week, just because of the holiday. We will be back with you on the 16th and bringing you more legal tips and tricks to help you navigate through these times. And then on the 23rd of July, we will actually have the U.S. Chamber with us, and they're going to be talking about what they're doing and some of the programs that they have kicked off and that they're also helping with. And who knows, by then we may have, we're hearing another round of stimulus monies could be coming out. So we'll get an update on what the status is on that. So, and of course, Paula, we'd love to have you join us again on the 16th and again on the 23rd. And again, we will continue these on Thursdays at 10 a.m. just for 1 hour. So thank you very much. Thank you to Fennemore Craig and Jessica for your incredible knowledge. And Paula, you know I'm eternally grateful with the SBDC and everything that you're doing. I really appreciate you keeping us up to date and keeping us in line with what's going on. So thanks again for joining us. We will see you in 2 weeks on Thursday, the 16th at 10 a.m. right here. So thanks again. Don't forget to register for the next one.